I'd love to welcome Peter Wallace to the stage. Peter has scaled high-performing teams at LendInvest Sporting Group and Camelot Lotteries, and his topic, I'll summarize this a little bit, Peter, but why cricketers are better than footballers? I guess that's what you're going to talk about?
Yes. Well, you can feel free to disagree with me if you have a particular penchant for one sport over the other. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm here to talk to you today about T-shaped leadership in the age of AI. Hopefully some of you will be familiar with that. How this can improve value delivery across product and engineering, all backed up by lessons learnt by me and my team scaling high-performing teams at LendInvest. And we'll touch on why I think cricketers are better than footballers, or are they? Before I get into the meat of it, a little bit about me. I'm Peter, following a consulting career at Accenture and Capgemini. I was chief architect at the National Lottery at Camelot, before being a 3-time CTO with over a decade of experience scaling fintech gambling businesses across ETX Capital, Sporting Group, and most latterly, LendInvest. When I originally agreed to this talk, I thought, what a great opportunity to use a sports analogy, lean into another industry that has high-performing teams, and compare successful England captains across cricket and football and their high-performing teams and successes. So cast your minds back. Picture the scene in November last year. Ben Stokes was about to head down under to take on a world-class Australian team in the Ashes series. Surely that was going to be a fertile ground full of examples of exemplary leadership and success. And then this happened, and poor performance. Before I get into unpicking this some more, I'd like to switch tack a little bit and talk a little bit about different types of people and their capabilities. So to understand different people's capabilities and skills, it's sometimes useful to use a model. This model has arguably been around since the 1980s. I'm sure those of you with grey hair will have seen this before in your time. It's been mostly attributed to Tim Brown, who was CEO of design agency IDEO, when he was explaining the sort of people that he thought or felt best performed in interdisciplinary teams. So these are the people that he called T-shaped people. Over the years, this model has been extended and modified to cover sort of 4 types. Starts with I-shaped people. This covers many types of people, for example, at the start of their careers, when they're developing deep skills in one specific area. In our engineering world, this would normally be a software language, a skill set associated with a specific role like QA or DevOps. T-shaped people are those that combine this deep knowledge in one area with a broad understanding across many others. Many of us CTOs in this room are naturally more T-shaped. These horizontal areas could be things like compliance, finance, supplier management, vendor negotiation skills, people management, mentoring, recruitment. It is what it needs to be. Tim Brown argued that having both depth in one area and breadth improved cross-functional working in teams. And this diversity produced higher performing teams. Over the years, this model has been expanded to include M-shaped people, so those with deep knowledge in multiple areas, so possibly gained in different industries, or working in different architectures or systems. And V-shaped people, where the broadening is in adjacent areas building upon the existing depth, where an engineer may, for example, be an expert in several complementary software languages or frameworks. Front-end engineer knowing both TypeScript, React, and Angular frameworks, for example. So as CTOs, you're obviously all aware that our role nowadays is broader than ever before. We're expected to have capabilities in other areas rather than just software engineering. So, commercial acumen, regulatory awareness, people leadership, vendor management, board communication, product design. To a degree, we expect to be experts in all of these things. How we acquire skills and experience in these areas, of course, is now changing. And that's where AI can help, obviously. It builds functional literacy across the horizontal bar way, way quicker. For example, in contract structures, AI can summarize lengthy contracts and distill key negotiating points way quicker than you can as a human. Financial management, understanding balance sheets, being able to talk to finance teams in language that they understand. P&L, budget forecast, cash flow, why cash flow is important. AI can help you understand, appreciate, and empathize with them more. Regulatory frameworks, nobody really likes to spend a lot of time with compliance. I mean, the amount of compliance training I've done over the decades is more than I'd ever care to remember. But keeping on top of evolving compliance needs and working effectively with those teams can be shortened. You can get better at it if you use AI. And working with boards, building, like we heard in the keynote yesterday, building that little persona that acts like that board member and simulates the sorts of questions that they will ask you, I think was incredibly powerful. Creating draft strategy documents, understanding board perspectives. I think AI can help with all of those areas and build that broader set of capabilities quicker. However, as many have already touched on, using AI, you have to remember it's only a tool. It will amplify the good and the bad. It provides speed, but sometimes at the expense of substance. It can't replace lived experience, nor professional judgment, nor, as we heard yesterday, provide empathy. So accelerate the learning curve, broaden, deepen your knowledge and capabilities, but remember, pattern recognition is not a substitute for professional judgment. So we understand a bit about people, and hopefully you'll understand how the different people in your team are shaped, but how can you improve the performance of your team? So there's another piece of research which was mentioned earlier today, which comes into this. Who's heard of Google's Project Aristotle? Wow, great. I'm glad some people have. So this was a 2-year study completed in 2014. So this is knowledge that's over a decade old that examined 180 teams at Google to try and understand why some are more effective than others. So it was a comprehensive study. I'll provide a link at the end of the presentation if you want to go and read the outcomes of that study in more detail. However, the key finding was that teams that excelled in the following 5 dimensions were consistently more effective and higher performing. These were psychological safety, so can I take risks and feel vulnerable safely? Dependability, can I count on my teammates to deliver? Structure and clarity, are goals, roles, and plans clear? Meaning, is the work personally important to us? And impact, do we believe our work matters and creates change? Of these 5 dimensions, psychological safety was by far the most important. Google provides some really good guidance for managers on how to improve this. Again, I recommend you read that. It's only a 1-pager. There'll be a link at the end. Of course, how you go about improving these dimensions, because everyone kind of reads that slide and goes, that's great, yeah, we've got that. That's all really obvious, we'll just do that. But how you go about doing it, will depend a bit about the context and of your culture, your environment, and where you're starting from. What I'm going to share with you is what I did at LendInvest and what worked for me and my team, and hopefully some of those points might resonate, some of them might be applicable to your context. It's also obviously worth noting that none of these dimensions are technical. So, just pause there for a moment. So in Google, the highest performing teams didn't write better quality code faster. They weren't better at their craft. They just had higher levels of psychological safety, dependability, structure, clarity, meaning, and impact, mostly people-centered attributes. So what did I do to improve psychological safety at LendInvest? Well, we focused on frequent quality feedback loops, such as fortnightly product team retros, monthly team lead retros, weekly demos. And we built a culture where it felt like we were all in this together through active enforcement of a no-blame culture top-down. Human errors celebrated as learning opportunities. Plenty of encouragement, support, and celebration. And above all, making sure everyone was present and inclusive. So it all sounds good and obvious. So what did I personally do? You kind of, yeah, we did retros, yeah, we've done all those things, but, did it really make a difference? So what I did was, for example, if we looked at, be present and inclusive, that meant that if you were having a face-to-face meeting, even one person or many people, shut your laptop. Don't sit there with it open. It's a distraction. It also shows that you're not actively listening to the points that are being made to the other people in the room. Acknowledge what other people are saying, reflect and mirror, ask lots of questions. Those active listening behaviours. That shows that you're present. Encouragement to me meant, there's a good example when a team member was volunteered for giving their first talk at a company all-hands meeting. Making time to rehearse with them, giving them positive feedback, making sure that they owned and felt confident with the content that they were going to present, providing additional context, where needed, checking in regularly in the run-up to that session about how they were feeling. Are you feeling all right about it? What are you worrying about? Show some empathy. Realize it was a big deal for them. On the day, be there in the room. Don't just join the meeting remotely like half your team. Actually sit there in the room to be there with them. Asking a pre-agreed question. Nobody likes a silence at the end of their presentation. Thanking them publicly on Slack afterwards. Basically, going the extra mile. Sounds obvious, but you have to do all these steps to really for them to feel supported and encouraged in doing something that would have been quite out of their comfort zone for them. Like many companies, things do go wrong. Humans do make mistakes. When things went wrong at LendInvest, what I did was quietly ask typically the team lead, come on, what happened on a DM on Slack to try and get a bit more context, and then contact the person who made the mistake and reassure them that we're keen to learn from this, that you're not going to blame them for it, but you're going to need them to sort of engage in that retro process. So involve others in the team, run a retro, and try and get that sort of wider awareness around, how the mistake, came about and how we can avoid making that mistake in the future. Again, treating it like a learning experience, not a blaming experience. Communicating upward to the stakeholders, managing the CEO's expectation. Hey, we had that outage. What went on? Who did what? Who messed up? Providing that protection is really important for your team. Own it and don't expose your team. When it came to dependability, structure, and clarity, it's really the simple things that made the biggest difference. So on delivery cadence, we had very visible delivery measured through DORA metrics. We had efficient flow enabled standardized software delivery cycle across the team. So, we just had a very, very simple way of measuring everybody across the team in the same way. So there's no divergence around, well, I'm being measured against these bars and they're being measured that way. It was just all the same for everyone. Clear roles. Well, this is one I find quite interesting. In all the smaller sort of scale-up organizations I've worked in, there's a huge amount of confusion because there's lots of made-up job titles and roles. There's too many heads of, directors of, because they were one of the original 10 people who joined the company, and now they've been there 5 years. They have to be a director. It's absolute nonsense, and you have to kind of work out how to fix that as a problem. These people aren't heads of anything typically. Typically, they don't even have a team. They've just been there longer than everyone else. So what I did at LendInvest is we just created a really, really straightforward career path structure that had people managers and individual contributors. It's not rocket science, but we cleared away all those heads of, director of roles and made it very clear kind of what each of the roles were, what they were there to do, how they were going to be measured, what it took to get promoted, and then divorced that whole pay and reward from the role. Because they got themselves into a situation at LendInvest where the highest role as an IC was senior engineer. So it's like, right, I'm a senior engineer, I've been here a long time, I want to earn more money. What do I do? Wow, I'm going to have to become a team lead. So you had ICs who were becoming people managers because a team lead paid more than a senior engineer. So you created all these bad behaviours where you had the wrong people leading teams because they didn't have necessarily the skills and capabilities to do that. So you have to kind of divorce the two, and in this case we created more IC roles above senior, so those people had a career path and didn't feel obligated to have to go and try and lead a team. Unless, of course, they wanted to, but options were important. We also got rid of the title junior engineer. I hate junior engineer. I think it's really demeaning. You're just a software engineer at the start of your career. But it was in use in other parts of the organisation. We had junior recruitment consultants or whatever. And I think, personally, it just didn't work for me. So I got rid of that, and we just made it really, really simple from engineer, mid-engineer, senior, lead. On the accountability side, it was just a straightforward using that weekly roll-up of outcomes that the team have achieved into the monthly report that then got shared to the whole company. It was about that lineage, so people could see exactly what they had done at that micro level and how that then impacted something at a monthly and whole company level. Also, having Slack channels public by default helped, so that there was no hiding. Everyone could jump in and see what a team was doing. So, they're very open in their communication style, but also about who was responsible for doing what. To help improve collaboration across product and engineering teams, and ultimately working with business stakeholders, we used some research from the Silicon Valley product group to help us understand the differences between delivery, feature, and product teams. So it starts with delivery teams. So these are also typically known as a Scrum team, a dev team. They are there to deliver projects. The product manager is typically the backlog administrator, or is called a delivery manager. The product designer is really just making the changes to the UI. They're measured by how many projects they delivered that month, year. They're effectively trying to do agile, but they're constrained within this waterfall process. And ultimately, the business value is owned by the project stakeholders or the steering group that's running those projects. Feature teams, this is at LendInvest, we like to think we had product teams, but actually we had feature teams. We were product in name, we called ourselves product teams, we were delivering features, and we were trying to measure what we were doing, but ultimately, we were doing what business stakeholders told us to do. Go and deliver these 10 features. I'll determine, what 10 are important because I know the industry better than you do. And then on the right-hand side is what, Marty Kagan and the Silicon Valley product group would call a proper sort of product team. So it's what some of you will recognize as an interdisciplinary, cross-functional, proper product team, where their purpose is to solve problems in a way the customer loves, yet work for the business. I love that phrase as a purpose. The product manager is the one who owns that value and business viability risk, which ultimately leads to the impact of the features they're delivering. The product designers are responsible for leading that user research, coming up with interactive designs, not just changes to UIs. Totally measured by outcomes, and you're following a total agile process from discovery all the way through delivery. And ultimately, the product manager owns that business value. Now, using this framework and actually writing it down and having an honest conversation with the team around, where are we now in these three kind of buckets and where do we want to be, basically gave us the permission to then talk to the business stakeholders and say, hey, being on the right-hand side is good. We want to be there. But you're going to have to give up that ownership of value, and you're going to have to work with us more collaboratively through our prioritization meetings to help us articulate what that value is. But the product manager is going to be the one that says, actually, we think that's got the higher value. That's what we're going to do first over that. So less of that gut feel. We need to just build this thing to a more data-driven, user research-led product delivery process. And that helped to really create a lot of meaning and impact across the team. But it was only really facilitated by drawing a picture like this, using some research grounded, and being honest about where we were and what would have to change to get there. The final part of Google's findings are in the meaning and impact area. So getting product and engineering teams to work more collaboratively was key. This meant really making the end-to-end process from discovery through define, develop, and deliver more transparent. So connecting the engineers who are writing the code all the way through to those business outcomes created that meaning and impact for everybody in the team, not just the product managers. This LinkedIn post is an example where we celebrated a change to our product transfer process. I won't go in to explain what that is, but basically our product designer, Conair, had gone out and spoken to all these mortgage brokers and said, why aren't you using our product transfer process? Come back with a bunch of research and said, this is what we need to do, and here's the evidence around why it's going to be successful. And then we made that change, and we communicated it, and it was a fantastic success. So it was the first thing we did once we'd understood how we wanted to work as a product team, and it was really important to publicly celebrate that as a product-led change rather than a business stakeholder-led change. So hopefully some of those points resonate with some of you here and may be applicable in your context in your business. But really, I know you've all really come to hear the proper question, which is who's the better captain? So is it Ben Stokes or is it Harry Kane? So Ben Stokes, well, if we look at him, he's good with both the bat and the ball. He's an all-rounder. He leads his team by example, and he does that. He gets the best out of his team through his own performance. He's the guy who can change a game, the outcome of a game, by his personal performance. So arguably he's T-shaped or possibly M-shaped. But did that make him a better captain? Did that help the team perform? In the Ashes, his bowling, which you can see up here, was solid. He was the second best performing England bowler. His batting was poor, but maybe that's because the Australians are above him on the bowling chart. His record as captain for England cricket is better. Overall, for players who've captained England over the last, for more than 10 tests, he has the highest win percentage at 55% for the last 45 years. He's the most successful England captain on that metric. So arguably, he does achieve success. Conversely, I'd argue Harry Kane was much more I-shaped or possibly slightly narrow T-shaped. He's scored over 500 professional goals across all tournaments. He is literally defined by that one metric. That's the one thing he does. You Google how successful is Harry Kane, it is just goals, 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 goals. But if you look at his record of England's team performance when he was captain, his win percentage is 69%. So it's greater than any cricket captain ever. So maybe, arguably, he is the better captain, or certainly a more successful one. But what about the team performance? Well, T-shaped leaders, all-rounders, we would naturally think would be better at captaining a team. Have the broader capabilities to be more successful. But in the Ashes series, the team failed to excel in these 5 key dimensions. Stokes blames bowlers for bowling inconsistently and destroying psychological safety in the team. The team's performance started to literally drop catches. Players could no longer rely on each other. The baseball game strategy, the game plan was inconsistent. Players not really understanding, clearly what they needed to do with the bat and ball, resulting them throwing away their wickets with reckless shots and bad behaviour outside of the game, driven by a lack of real meaning and impact. Compared to the cricketers, the England football team have come a long way since 1996 in improving psychological safety under Gareth Southgate. These are the 2 images across those years of Southgate obviously missing penalty or having penalty saved, and then more recently in 2024. I'd argue that the greater team acceptance, effectiveness drove the performance more than the individual captain in these cases. So in summary, if you want to improve the performance of your team, focus on the team effectiveness and the 5 dimensions that Google highlighted, and most importantly, psychological safety. This is easier as you broaden your capabilities and become more team-shaped, become more of an all-rounder, and use AI to accelerate and amplify learning new capabilities and deepening existing ones. Thank you, that's all I've got. There's a link tree on here with links to the wider content and the presentation, so please do take a moment to scan it if you're interested in reading more and learning more or connecting with me. I think we're out of time.
Well, let's see.
I don't know, it's flashing at me.
It may be we're out of time. I don't know. If they don't put the Slido up, that means you're out of time. I think you may be out of time. Hopefully you guys scanned the
I'll be
code.
around for the rest of the day if you want to ask questions, though.
Peter Wallace, thank you so
Thank you.
much. Did you answer the question, though?
Well,
I'm gonna put you on the spot.
I think ultimately Ben Stokes has the capability to be a better captain, but the team beneath him aren't performing.
Oh, okay. What a way to get off the stage, right? No, let's give him a round of applause. It'll be a lot nicer. Thank you, Peter.